Frank here. The intro music is from The Arrival of the Queen of Sheba from Handel's Oratorio Solomon, because today we're looking at how Solomon is portrayed in the Bible and the Quran. The Queen of Sheba makes an entrance in both books. King Solomon lived around 3,000 years ago, and his life and times are described in the Old Testament books of 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles. The kingdom of Israel reached its apogee under Solomon, and he built the first temple in the city of Jerusalem, which had been captured by his father David. Since that time, Jerusalem has been the city of the temple, or the ruins of that temple.
2 Chronicles chapter 1 records that God asked the newly crowned king to wish for anything he wanted. Solomon famously asked for wisdom, and because he asked for wisdom, rather than wealth or power, God gave him all of the above. 2 Chronicles does not spare the superlatives when describing Solomon's wealth and greatness, and the Queen of Sheba's visit serves to illustrate both. Sheba, or Saba, is claimed by Yemen and Ethiopia amongst others. Josephus placed it well south of Egypt. Wherever it was, this lady travelled a long way, and 2 Chronicles 9 says she arrived with a caravan of camels loaded with treasures and spices. She asked Solomon many difficult questions, and he answered them all. At the end, she was overwhelmed by Solomon's wisdom and wealth, as we hear in chapter 9, verse 5. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true, but I did not believe what they said until I came and saw it with my own eyes." Then in verse 9, then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stones. There never had been such spices as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon.
The rest of the chapter catalogues Solomon's wealth, listing the vast quantities of gold and silver, cedar wood, etc. The book of 1 Kings has a parallel account, but gives more detail about Solomon's life, with a somewhat negative assessment of his later years. Things went rapidly downhill after his death, and the kingdom was divided. Solomon is also an important character in Islam, and he appears in several passages in the Quran. However, you will notice the account in Surah 27 is somewhat different to Chronicles.
And Solomon was David's heir. He said, "O ye people, we have been taught the speech of birds, and on us has been bestowed a little of all things. This is indeed grace manifest from Allah." And before Solomon were marshalled his hosts of jinns and men and birds, and they were all kept in order and ranks. At length, when they came to a valley of ants, one of the ants said, "O ye ants, get into your habitations, lest Solomon and his hosts crush you underfoot without knowing it." Jumping to 20. And he took a muster of the birds, and he said, "Why is it I see not the hoopy? Or is he among the absentees? I will certainly punish him with a severe penalty, or execute him, unless he bring me a clear reason for absence." But the hoopy tarried not far. He came up and said, "I have compassed territory which thou hast not compassed, and I have come to thee from Saba with tidings true."
Before reading the hoopy's report from Saba, just in case you missed it, even ants recognised Solomon and knew they should keep out of his way. On his parade ground were not only men, but birds and jinns. You may have encountered jinns in other literature, or perhaps you even have a brass lamp. But let's hear the hoopy's report.
"I found there a woman ruling over them and provided with every requisite, and she has a magnificent throne. I found her and her people worshipping the sun besides Allah." Verse 27, Solomon said, "Soon we shall see whether thou hast told the truth or lied. Go thou with this letter of mine and deliver it to them, then draw back from them and wait to see what answer they return." Summarising the next few verses, the Queen received Solomon's letter, in which he demanded she come to him in submission. After discussing it with her ministers, she complied, but Solomon had some tests planned for her when she arrived. Verse 41, he said, "Transform her throne out of all recognition by her. Let us see whether she is guided to the truth or is one of those who receive no guidance." So when she arrived, she was asked, "Is this thy throne?" She said, "It was just like this, and knowledge was bestowed on us in advance of this, and we have submitted to Allah in Islam." And he diverted her from the worship of others besides Allah, for she was sprung of a people that had no faith. She was asked to enter the lofty palace, but when she saw it, she thought it was a lake of water, and she tucked up her skirts, uncovering her legs. He said, "This is but a palace, paved smooth with slabs of glass." She said, "O my lord, I've indeed wronged my soul. I do now submit in Islam with Solomon to the Lord of worlds."
Some observations. In the Quran, Solomon does not encourage his birds to exercise initiative. They should turn out for parade if they want to avoid punishment or execution. The Hoopi's display of initiative makes Solomon distrust him and suspect he is lying. And the Queen of Sheba does not seem too interested in wisdom, but gets tricked by a fake throne and a glass floor. I should mention the jinns, which are supernatural beings made of smokeless fire, and who work for Solomon as slaves, doing all kinds of building work. These jinns were tricked into continuing to work even after Solomon died, leaning on his stick, until he finally keeled over when a worm chewed the stick. You can read about this in Surah 24.
Solomon is also mentioned by Jesus in the Gospels, but he seemed to invert the superlatives. In the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 6:28, he said, "And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these." Jesus described the lilies of the field which clothe the grass, which is here today and gone tomorrow, as being more splendid than Solomon's finery. And in Matthew 12:42, he refers to the Queen of Sheba's visit. "The Queen of the South will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, something greater than Solomon is here."
The meaning of these words might be lost on us, but Jesus was claiming to be greater than the greatest, wisest king who ever ruled Israel. God had told Solomon he would have a kingdom like none before or after him. So how could Jesus have such a high opinion of himself? The answer is that Jesus was claiming to be someone far greater. He was claiming to be the Messiah, Israel's anointed king. In the last week or so, before he was arrested and crucified, Jesus taught in the temple courts and engaged in a running verbal battle with the religious leaders. After a series of questions intended to trap him, Jesus asked them a question.
While the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them, "What do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he?" "The son of David," they replied. He said to them, "How is it then that David, speaking by the Spirit, calls him Lord? For he says, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet.' If then David calls him Lord, how can he be his son?" No one could say a word in reply, and from that day on, no one dared to ask him any more questions. Solomon was David's son, but Jesus was making a claim here to be the one who would sit at God's right hand until all his enemies were defeated. In several places, the Old Testament speaks about a coming king who will rule the world and whose rule and kingdom will be eternal. For example, in this passage from Isaiah, which you might recognise as being reproduced at length in Handel's Messiah, he is called the Prince of Peace and the one who will rule on David's throne forever. In the second passage from Daniel, it refers to one who is the Son of Man, the title Jesus frequently applied to himself. He was given authority, glory and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Jesus was claiming to be this king who will return to rule the world.
So what should we think of Solomon? According to the Old Testament, he was a great king and very wise. According to the Quran, he was served by jinns, but was suspicious of birds. In the New Testament, Jesus used him as an illustration, as he also used the Queen of Sheba as an illustration, but as an example of someone who travelled far to seek wisdom. All these pictures of Solomon foreshadow a great king. How do you gain his approval? Do you use your initiative? Is showing up on the parade ground every day important? Or should you desire his wisdom and go wherever you must to find it? See you next time.